introduce Dr. Dan. My family would have a fit. Take the apron off. So, good morning. Thank you. So fabulous to be able to see everybody. Glad everybody's feeling good. I know that there's had some viruses and whatnot, but this is wonderful. What a gift. You know, I got up this morning and it was over 50 degrees at home. It's like unheard of, but we will take it.
Yeah, that's good.
So we're really very, in addition to being able to celebrate Mr. Newton's birthday together, very glad to be able to welcome Dr. Dan Coleman back with us. And Dr. Dan is a hospitalist at
many places,
yeah, through Stewart. And you know, he always brings good information and takes time to answer some good questions, and we really appreciate that. And we were thinking how many years that we've quartered doing this, and it's probably
5 or 6.
It's gotta be. Yeah.
I have it written down somewhere, but I don't know.
Next month in March, speaker will be Phil Trapani, who is stepping down to select, or not, choosing not to run for again another term. So I thought that would be a good opportunity to be able to thank him for his service and let him look back over. It's 9 years, right? Yeah. So that's next month. And then in April, Dave Schofield, who is the general manager of the light department, has agreed to be our speaker then. So good things coming. So I'm going to turn this to Dan, and I can go around and see if as I can grab some more pancakes from the kitchen and coffee and come around.
So first of all, I'd like to say that our office is in Roxford, and our light department is much better than theirs, or something. I don't know what, but we keep losing power over there, and we rarely lose power in Georgetown, or at least where we live. So I have to say that. So
yeah, they are
good for them.
And they're very,
and
very
Phil Trapani, we're overthrowing Phil. He's not stepping down.
That's right.
He's being deposed. He's being deposed. No,
He'll get some personal life back.
Yeah, exactly.
Which Gary and Doug wouldn't know anything about the time spent. I mean, it's huge when people take a role like that, you guys. It's really huge.
So I think I've been here now at least 5 years, maybe 6 or 7.
Well, that's what I'm thinking of. How old your kids were?
Well, my oldest is 18. I don't know.
So they were young.
I don't know, a while. And I see some new faces. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And I think this is great to gather and celebrate each other. I think it's once a month, right? Is that once a month? Okay, good. In years past, I think first of all we started this kind of loosey-goosey to show up on what's going on and any random questions. And then for a few years we had we kind of planned ahead what were some topics that might be of interest. I think we've talked about how to talk to your doctor, end-of-life planning and decision-making and code status and things like that. We talked about disease processes, high blood pressure, heart attacks, strokes, things like that. And then we also talked about physiology. I thought one year would be interesting to talk about how the brain works and how the heart works and how the lungs, and we talked about that and we had some pictures. We don't have a dry erase board or paper, so actually what I was going to talk about today is actually better. It's not as illustration driven as some other topics are easy to chat about. We've talked about medications, we've talked about settings of care, home care, being at home with visiting nurses, going to the ER, being admitted, going to rehab or home with, all kinds of places, and miscellaneous things. So I was getting ready this morning, I said, I don't know what we're talking about here today because we didn't organize this. So I thought that I would just kind of came to mind, talk about Armageddon. No, not quite Armageddon, but some, we've got the Zika virus and all kinds of viruses and pathology and, things are going on in the world that are unusual and new and changing. I was going to talk about where we were 150 years ago and where we are now. Also about global pandemics, maybe if you want to talk about that. I've got a bunch of topics that we can discuss. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria, we can talk about antibiotics and resistance and things like that because those are in the news, bad things that are happening all over. What not to use antibiotics on, I touch on that periodically because that's one of my hot spots. It's called antibiotic stewardship. In medicine, they're talking about it more and more. They're teaching medical students how to use antibiotics correctly. Because if we overuse them now, we'll lose their utility in the future, either for us or for our kids or our grandchildren or humanity. viruses versus bacteria versus parasites, and I put cancer in there, which I would let you know, because the differences between what's a virus and what's a bacteria is a big deal. It may not be clear and obvious all the time, but it is something to chat about. Immunizations are always interesting to talk about. Immunity versus allergies, and how your body decides what is self and what is other. And then like the flu pandemics. So I just wanted to start with where we've come. I'm not a medical historian by any means, but if you think about, there's a new movie coming out about Civil War, or is it a movie or a TV series about Civil War doctors and healthcare.
Well, there is a TV series now.
Mercy Street on
Mercy.
PBS.
It's like a 6-series thing or something like that, and that's I'm not a historian, but they were talking about doing amputations where they just cut the leg off in 20 seconds. If you're not done in 30 seconds, you're a bad doctor. I mean, that's amazing. When you think about where we were back then and doing amputations just using ether. Ether is deadly. You poured ether in people's like a breathing cloth, and you either knock them out, or they're conscious and getting cut, or they die. I mean, it was a really dicey thing. And now we've got anesthesiologists who can mix different types of anesthesia and make sure that you're asleep and not in pain and paralyzed and not jerking and moving and still breathing. We've got surgeons who can do microsurgery on eyeballs and vessels and nerves. It's incredible. We've got all kinds of new antibiotics now. If you think about it, penicillin and those things, I believe we're only, and correct me if all of you know dates better than I do, I would assume that some might, because haven't ever really looked
Some of
at
these guys were here at the time.
during the invention of penicillin. Well, I think penicillin was starting to become known in like the World War I and World War II time.
World War II, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like in that period they were going from, bacteria aren't growing around this mold, and then by World War II there was penicillin everywhere. After a while we realized that penicillin wasn't a cure for everything. But antibiotics have made remarkable improvements over time. We've talked about, research and development, the ability of both the government and private industry to do research and advances in antibiotics and cancer therapy. We've got gene therapy now, gene manipulation, immunizations are more common. If you think about it, back in the 1800s, people were dying of ear infections. You would get mastoiditis and you would die of an ear infection. People were dying of tooth infections. You would get sinusitis and then you'd get meningitis and you die. People were dying of pneumonia all the time. 1 in 8 women were dying in birth. Now, if somebody dies in birth, it makes the news. It's at least here in the United States.
Blood poisoning was a big thing back.
Sepsis.
Not too many years.
Yeah, sepsis. So I don't want to be a downer for this whole talk. We've made astronomical improvements, but there are some things that are concerning, and I just wanted to put some things in perspective. I think it's important when you talk about immunizations and pandemics and things like that, you need to think about where we were, where we are now, and we're still making progress, but we have some challenges in front of us. Do you have questions particularly about what types, swine flu, bird flu, influenza, antibiotics, immunizations, flus, or anything like that?
About Lyme disease.
Lyme disease is a tick-borne illness. It is most common in the Northeast and is also in the Midwest and the North. It is, if you talk to infectious disease doctors, most of them are convinced that it can be cured completely with longer courses of antibiotics. It is fairly common. The most risky part of Lyme disease is if you get Lyme disease where the doctors aren't used to it. So if you're a Florida, Massachusetts person, probably the Florida doctors are used to seeing Lyme disease. But if you were to get Lyme disease in Nebraska, here, and then go to Nebraska, they would not be looking for Lyme disease, and it could progress. And one of the complications of Lyme disease is if it gets in your cerebrospinal fluid in your brain, and it's harder to get rid of there. It can be gotten rid of by all measures that we know of, but for many people, it can cause. Certainly it can affect the joint. It's when people start becoming more fatigued and just kind of depressed, and it causes more of a global decrease in function. And it's not explainable to me why that is. I believe that it's true, but I'm not a specialist, so
If it goes
there's
undetected,
disagreement.
is it still curable after a period of time?
It can be curable, yes, it should be curable for good, and I'm not sure whether people who are more predisposed to chronic fatigue or chronic pain have worse outcomes. It's definitely, chronic problems with Lyme disease are legit, but it's on one of, there are many diseases where either we don't know what's going on or it's underlying, like there's a mixture of disease process plus perception and people have chronic problems. There's a whole little gray zone there where you've got, depression, chronic pain, Lyme disease, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, all kinds of things. And kind of, they go up and down over the years and decades. There's more research and, there's microscopic inflammation causing fibromyalgia. Oh, no, it's not. I don't know. But it's a small percentage, and it's that kind of disputed gray zone that you have commonly seen in medicine with people who are like, my doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. Yes, sir.
What's that new virus, is it? Mosquitoes from people have been down?
Yeah, Zika virus. So first I heard of Zika virus was 3 weeks ago, so I haven't done any real research. But it seems that, so the Zika virus itself, when you get it, it's really relatively inconsequential to us. If all of us were to go on a tour to Brazil, even if we all got it, we'd be fine. It's really inconsequential to us. What it seems that it's affecting, it seems that there's a relationship between the Zika virus and pregnancy and microcephaly. Microcephaly is when, micro meaning small, cephaly meaning head. Microcephaly is when your brain doesn't develop appropriately, and it can be catastrophic to just bad. I don't think they're describing it accurately in the news about how bad it is. You can't get better from microcephaly. There's no treatment. Once you have it, that's it. You are bummed. So, and some people are born with microcephaly so bad that their breathing centers and their whole their ability of their brain to function doesn't develop, and they just can't feed themselves, and they get aspiration and they die. So it can be catastrophic. There's minor and major microcephaly. Not categories, but it's a spectrum of how bad it is. So I think that's what it is. My impression is that they are hoping that they will be able to come up with a vaccination in the next 2 years or so. So that's a good thing, but then once you have the vaccination, how do you get it out to all the poor people in the backwoods in El Salvador and Brazil? And Americans are going to be relatively less affected because we are able to be inside with screens in Florida and Louisiana, bug repellent, and control when you have your babies to some degree. It's the people who are in third world countries or countries where they just don't have anything
They'll be bringing DDT back again.
which is better, the cure of the disease, hard to say. I don't know. So Zika virus is a serious thing. It's not going to affect us up here, certainly, and it won't affect probably anybody here. Yes, sir.
I was bitten by a tick and spent a week in the hospital in quarantine. They couldn't find where the tick bit me. They examined every inch of my body. And the only good thing about it was all student nurses.
all the nurses were checking your body. Hey, you want to check me again?
Every bone and muscle in my body ached.
Yeah. When was that? How long ago was that?
About 2 months ago.
Oh, really?
3 months
That's
ago.
very interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought that if we can't think of a reason to keep you in the hospital, you're out of here. You'll kick you out. So yeah, you must have been a real interesting case for them. I guess maybe they thought you might have had something else odd going on.
I didn't realize Salem Hospital was part of Mass General.
Mm-hmm.
It's a teaching hospital.
So the things that I'm worried most about as a physician, I think that if you talk about the big picture, the most concerning thing to me would be a bird flu or swine flu pandemic. And the reason is because, first of all, bacteria are cellular. They're cells. They're one-celled, and they're everywhere. They're on your skin, in your mouth, in your nose. Bacteria live on us normally, on our skin everywhere, and they live in our entire digestive system and mouth. So everywhere from your mouth, nose, to your stomach, to your intestines, to your colon are bacteria. Everything else in your body is supposed to be sterile. Under your skin is supposed to be sterile, your muscles, even your urine is supposed to be sterile. Everything else is supposed to be sterile. Bacteria are one-celled organisms, and they're everywhere. And your body can usually tell what's a bacteria because it's separate than self. It's not me, it's got separate DNA. Viruses, on the other hand, live inside your cells. They live inside your cells, they get inside your cells and they replicate within your cell. So it's harder for your body to identify what is a virus and what is myself. So it's just a lot harder process. And viruses, if you're a successful virus, what you do is you infect somebody, you replicate, I sneeze, and then you all get sick, and you don't die before your virus replicates to somebody else. And if you're a well-evolved virus, you don't kill your host. You're just supposed to like spread and live and mutate and keep living. So the viruses that are most dangerous seem to be the ones that aren't used to being in humans. So if you have places in Southeast Asia where they live with the animals in the houses, in huts and things like that, you have viruses and animals, pigs and chickens and poultry and such, and humans living together, and humans can get hybrid viruses from these pigs and birds and things. Usually these are not well adapted viruses. Usually they're either very lethal and the person dies, and they are very lethal, or they are super non-lethal and they can spread, but not very well. Or they're just not well adapted. They're well adapted to pigs and chickens and pigeons and things like that. So we've had a few outbreaks, and they do have high mortalities sometimes, 50, 80% mortality, but it's 3 people or 300 people or something like that. If one of those things were to get loose, it could be really a bad thing for humanity. And I don't know exactly, but it would depend on how high the mortality rate would be. It would be worse in Southeast Asia and where people are very closely packed. Less so here, but it would affect us. And that would be my biggest concern, is that we could lose 5 or 50% of the world's population in a year or two. That would be a catastrophe. That would be a social catastrophe. You can look up pandemics and see what you come up with and find other things, but that would be a bad thing. The other things that I would think would be bad would be tuberculosis in Russia is becoming less and less treatable. To treat tuberculosis now, you have to use a mixture of 3 kinds of antibiotics. And if you don't use the right 3 at the right strength and the right duration, which is 9 months, 9 months to treat this. And if you don't use the right ones and you don't use the right duration, what happens is it becomes more and more resistant. And now we're seeing tuberculosis that needs to be treated with 4 antibiotics. And that's hard to do. A lot of times they'll treat it with 1 antibiotic or 2 in Russia or wherever, and they're just making it more and more resistant. Tuberculosis is kind of a drag because when you cough, it stays in the environment for longer, much longer than most types of transmissible diseases. If somebody were to cough in the green line and get off, it would stay in that car for 15, 20 minutes. So it is very transmissible, and it can be a very bad thing. Tuberculosis, if it doesn't kill you, it can become dormant, and it usually would become dormant in your lungs. Is primarily a disease of your lungs, and you get little granules of tuberculosis, and then later on in life, it'll pop up when your immunogenicity goes down, your immune response goes down. So that's why it's a disease, an acute disease. It does kill people acutely, but also it pops up later in life. I don't mean to be a downer on this whole talk, but that concerns me. Yes, sir.
Do you think that'll go back to the sanitarium situation that used to exist, that they isolated the sick people till they were cured?
That's a good question, because these diseases, your body does have white blood cells. We do fight off infection naturally. We do have the ability. Not everybody needs an antibiotic. Not everybody needs. That's one of the topics, is what you don't need antibiotics for. It's the things that, like tuberculosis, which is kind of chronic. You can just keep coughing and coughing and coughing for a long time. I think in the United States we're in a better situation than many other places. I doubt that any of these things are going to affect us, or probably our kids, but this might be the challenges of the future. But then if you think about where we've come in 150 years, we might have gene manipulation where we can give people with tuberculosis, we can infect them with another kind of tuberculosis that diminishes that one, and then as you spread it, I don't know, I'm just brainstorming it. But I haven't lost all hope, not at all. I'm just saying that we have to be stewards of our our healthcare and antibiotics and do smart things for the future, not just looking at ourselves or our Georgetown or ourselves or our population or whatever.
Is tuberculosis today different than it was back in the early 30s, 20s and 30s?
Bacteria is the same, just more resistant.
They used to quarantine, I had two brothers that had tuberculosis when they were
Yeah.
4 or 5 years old. And they were gone for, well, they didn't know until they were 4 or 5 years old. They finally came home.
Isn't that amazing? That is
And they
amazing.
used to put them in the sanatorium. They
Yeah.
came down in
Middleton, they have Middleton Sanatorium.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the percentage cure rate, just cure rate on your own of tuberculosis is. I would think that it's on the order of 90% if I had to guess. If I had a multiple choice guess on my boards in front of me, I would guess that the cure rate is 90% and chronicity is 10%. Just guessing.
That test is really simple, isn't it?
So yeah, so in America we use a PPD. It's a tuberculosis test. You get it under your arm. Healthcare providers will get it every year or two, depending on your risk. And if you get a bump, that means you've been exposed to tuberculosis. It doesn't mean you have tuberculosis. They'll do a chest X-ray, and if you are a positive reactor, they may give you antibiotics for like 9 months to say that you don't have it. If you're over 40, you probably wouldn't get the antibiotics, and you would get serial chest X-rays for 3 years or something. If you're younger than 40, they would give you the 9 months of antibiotics, I believe, as I recall, and that's because the antibiotics themselves have some toxicity. And the older you are, your risk is less and they're more toxic, and the younger you are, you've got more life in front of you, and it's better to take the risk. So it's very statistical, but that's, having more evidence and statistical knowledge and using numbers in aggregate is one of the advances that we have, is, the CDC and people who can take numbers in aggregate and kind of crunch the numbers and see what's good.
I have a question for you. For long-term antibiotic use, what does the medical community do about, how do they address gut health?
I think for long-term antibiotic use, the most let's see here. We're using lactobacillus these days. There are some probiotics out there, different mixtures of bacteria that help maintain your normal gut flora. What's going to happen is if you're on an antibiotic, you're going to kill bacteria that are sensitive to that anyway, and you may get diarrhea, you may not. And then if you take let's say you take a lactobacillus pill or there are other kinds of pills that have different mixtures of bacteria. If you kill half of them, then the other half live, and if the half that live are still good and normal, then that's good. What the problem is when you take antibiotics, you select for 1 or 2 or 10 kinds of bacteria, and if those irritate your gut or you can get diarrhea, women can get yeast infections, you can get those types of things. Your gut flora protects you against things like Clostridium difficile. So if we eat a bad salmonella in a chicken, if you've got 1,000 good salmonella on that chicken, non-toxic, and there are non-toxic salmonella, you're not going to get significantly ill with salmonella. But if it's, so if you've got an unbalanced gut microbiome, you might have a problem with C. diff or those types of things.
So would they normally just prescribe a probiotic along with an antibiotic course? Or?
I would think that if you're going to be taking you mean long-term like 3 weeks, or do you mean long-term like your whole life?
Oh, no, you were talking about 9 months.
Exactly, yeah, okay. So if you're taking one kind of antibiotic and I give you probiotic for a month, you probably don't need to take it anymore, because more isn't going to make you better, because the ones that are going to live, period, and the ones that are going to die, probably going to die anyway. So I don't think that you need to be on it forever. If you're, women who are on chronic antibiotics for UTI suppression, usually aren't on a probiotic forever. Who might else be on long-term? Kids with acne aren't usually on a probiotic for a long period of time. Things like that.
TB, was that known as consumption?
I believe so.
Yeah, and that was so widespread, especially in the 1800s. A lot of people just died.
Yeah, so TB was bad. Oh, I was talking about PPD. In the United States, where our frequency of tuberculosis is very low, we check to see who's got tuberculosis and we treat it. In Europe and most of the world, the people get an immunization against tuberculosis. So they're all positive reactors. So Many of my colleagues who come from foreign countries, they're positive, they have positive PPDs, and they've had serial chest x-rays in the past, and they just say, okay, yeah, I had 3 negative chest x-rays in 1989, 90, and 91, not okay. So it doesn't, the problem is that with us, if we all had PPDs placed and only one person had a chest x-ray, a positive, we could check that person for serial chest x-rays and that'd be it. We wouldn't all have to be getting PPDs all the time. Whereas if we all got immunized, the PPD test wouldn't work, and if somebody came up with TB, then everybody you've been exposed to forever would have to get chest x-rays because we can't use this. So we'd be getting all a bunch of chest x-rays, x-ray exposure, zillions of x-rays, all the people on the green line that you were on, and it's a different philosophy, and it has to do with the risk. The risk of TB is higher in other countries, so they want to decrease the risk of actually getting it, and they're willing to try to decrease the risk of getting it.
Wasn't TB immunization part of the immunization that we got as children? Or?
No, that's Tdap. That's tetanus, diphtheria, and activated pertussis. Tetanus. I brought some information about these. Diphtheria, used to in kids, it was one of the top 3 causes of sudden death in kids under 15. The death rate was 20% in kids for diphtheria. Tetanus, even with current treatment, tetanus kills 1 in 7 people. That's 13% death rate if you get tetanus. And that wanes every 5 to 10 years. So we should all be getting tetanus shots every few years. I think that most of us do. Pertussis, whooping cough, it's very communicable and it lasts for months. If any of you ever had it, you cough for a long time.
And they talk about adults or even seniors and so forth, kind of carrying that.
Yeah, it's kind of a low-level sickness. You don't feel like too sick. You're just coughing. But it kills kids. It kills 1 to 2% of kids.
And they've been advertising that over the last months from time to time, like on TV. If you're an oldster, the grandparent, like be careful with little kids. That was just my observation.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Immunizations, I think that as a healthcare provider, I have to get immunized against everything and the flu shot. That's my responsibility. I have a bunch of patients in hospitals that they can't get away from me. Like, I'm going to see you, so it's not fair for me to come to you, not have gotten my flu shot. So the flu shot discussion is a separate discussion, and it also involves whether you're exposed to people with the flu or what age you are and what you do in life. If you're a doctor or nurse, you should get the flu shot. If you are, you guys can decide on your own about flu shots. Flu can be very bad. It periodically kills millions of people in the world. And, the major complaints about shots in general, they cause localized reactions. And in general, immunizations will cause localized reactions. They'll cause redness and swelling and pain. That's pretty common. People have questions about Guillain-Barré. That's a paralytic disease that goes from bottom to up and then usually goes away completely. Well, not usually goes away completely, usually goes away. I would say more often than not there's some residual weakness or something's not quite right. But if you think about the flu, the risk of Guillain-Barré is, what's that here? I didn't know what you'd be asking me, so I didn't type everything on there. I just brought my. So Guillain-Barré, it's 10 times higher the risk of Guillain-Barré if you get the flu. And we had a young lady in my office that got the flu this year, and she was out for a week, and she's 24. So, that's not good.
Well, I know over at the VA clinic in Haverhill, if a veteran walks in there, you'd think you're going overseas again. They give you all these shots. Whooping cough, pneumonia, shingles, flu.
Yeah.
Tetanus.
Yeah, so tetanus is super bad to get. Pneumonia you should get, I think it's once before 50 and then and again at 50. So basically the reason I don't know the immunization schedules is because as a primary care doctor you do know that, and I did 15 years ago know the schedules. But then as a hospitalist, you're just like, nurses, can you take care of these things? Because they're set, like, here's what you do. So anything we don't have to do, we forget, and we pawn off on other people. That's what we do.
What's a hospitalist?
Hospitalists are doctors that work in the hospital. So we have a lot of support, we can help.
They work instead of your regular doctor.
We're like primary care doctors in the
Oh,
hospital.
okay.
So most hospitalists are gonna be internal medicine or family medicine. They do have new hospitalists these days that are, they have surgical hospitalists that don't have an outside panel, they just do surgeries. They have new, like obstetrical hospitalists, because that's one of the major gripes of obstetrician lifestyle is that people have babies all the time, you know, popping out whenever they want.
What hospital are you associated with?
I was working at Merrimack Valley Hospital until about 3 years ago, and then we started working in mostly in skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes. I am credentialed at Anna Jake's, Merrimack Valley, Holy Family, and Lawrence General, and soon to be Lowell General. I don't round at those places. The reason we have credentialing is because we get a lot of patients from them, and we request labs and X-rays, and if you need a unit of packed red blood cells, we can order it ourselves without having to ask other people to order it. You can do those things on a courtesy basis. You can, but if you're going to be a local doc, you should probably just get credentialed with the local hospital. We work mostly in the skilled nursing facilities, nursing homes. My group is in about 14 nursing homes. We're in Whittier Bradford, which is an LTAC, a long-term acute care hospital. So that's got a hospital feel. Acute care hospital. We've got 3 people working now at Lawrence General Hospital. We are at Summit Detox. It's a new acute detox hospital in Haverhill. We're at Whittier Pavilion. It's a psych hospital, and at Health South Concord up in Concord, New Hampshire. It's an acute rehab hospital. So we're in a lot of different places. We're not in the acute care setting much anymore, but we're still, rounding, seeing patients frequently. Pneumonia immunizations are good. Varicella, chickenpox. If you get chickenpox, you're much more likely to get shingles. Oh, and we all probably had chickenpox. I had chickenpox. And you're immune as heck to chickenpox. You won't get chickenpox again, that's for sure. Well, not for sure. You can actually get chickenpox twice. You can. It's very uncommon. It would be later in life. It would be much later in life after your immunity. But getting the varicella shot decreases your risk of shingles a lot. You may get chickenpox, probably not. And if you were to get shingles, it would be much, much, much more benign. I don't know if any of you ever had shingles, but it is not a pleasurable thing from what I've been seeing. I even had somebody who had shingles so bad that their arm was paralyzed. It was remarkable. Yes, sir.
Years ago, they used to quarantine, come to the house, put a pink slip on the door.
Mhm.
Your house was quarantined.
For chickenpox?
Chicken pox, scarlet fever, whooping cough. My sister had scarlet fever, and we had, I think, better than a week out of school.
Yeah, scarlet fever. Yeah, so that's one of the manifestations of strep throat. Strep throat is interesting because strep pharyngitis. It's not the strep throat that you're curing when you give people antibiotics. You do. But what you're avoiding is the risk of heart complications because you get rheumatic heart disease from strep throat, and you get kidney failure. You can't have kidney failure from strep throat because of an autoimmune reaction in the kidney. So when we see people with sore throats, it's nice to make them feel better, but they'll mostly get better on their own. That's why we swab their throat to see if it's strep A, or group B strep, group B, I think. Group B strep, I think. And we check it to see if it's positive, and then we treat them with antibiotics. The other people, you just give Tylenol and Motrin and tell them to gargle, and if you're better in 3 days, then that's great, you got better. It's one of those things where your body can cure. It can ward it off. You can get an infection that's worse than these antibiotics, but that's a separate thing, and you're just treating the infection. You don't want them to get an abscess or whatever. So that's a separate thing. In the old days, from what I understand, people used to have chickenpox parties. Because you're actually, chickenpox is less of a fearsome thing when you're younger in life. So if one kid had chickenpox, all the neighborhood kids would come over. This is before, and they'd all get chickenpox because it's just better to get it over with, and it's less of a significant disease younger in life. Because if I were to get chickenpox, or you guys were to get chickenpox for the first time, it can be a very bad thing to get chickenpox, primary chickenpox, later in life. So there was, it wasn't bad, it wasn't stupid. It was the time, and that was appropriate. I don't think we would do that now.
I got it at 32.
How,
I went to the doctor and he said, you got chicken pox. I said, I can't. I said, that's a young kid's disease. He said, you got it now.
was it a big deal or no big deal? Just went
No
away?
big deal. I got 2 or 3, things on my arms. But it went away. But I got the shingle shot, 3 years ago,
Mhm.
just in case.
Okay.
Yeah, the shingle shots came out when, about 15 years ago?
I don't know. They've been out as long as I've been. I went to medical school in 95, something like that. So they've been out since 95 at least.
I got them in Connecticut about 15 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
shots.
I believe you. I don't know how there you go. Maybe we could look. I don't know how long they've been out for. I don't know. What were you gonna
It's a
say?
good thing you got it.
Yeah, it was good to get.
When I come up with chicken pox, I was about 30 maybe, and they wouldn't let me go back to work like 2 weeks.
As long as it's open, you can't go. You can't go get other people sick. So as long as you've got any blisters, or if they're scabbed over, then you theoretically can go back. But I mean, if you've got scabs all over your body, who wants to go back to work? You're not going to be very popular with
You
it.
get scratched in there when it gets
That's the one
scared.
when you stayed in the dark room?
I don't know. Does
What
it
was the
cause?
one that you stayed in the dark room? Was it chicken pox?
German
measles.
German
Measles.
measles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Must have offended the eyes.
What is pleurisy?
Pleurisy is when you have irritation of your pleura, which is in your lungs. So the way that your lungs stick, this is where it would be nice to have a dry erase board. The way that your lungs work.
Next year.
What was that?
Next year.
Yeah, next year. That's right. In the new place with the dry erase boards, I'll be there. I'll bring my own colorful pens. I got 2 or 3 big dry erase boards in my office. Pleurisy is when you've got irritation of the pleura. That's what holds the rib cage and the lungs together. There's a thin liquid layer there that holds it together. In fact, it's interesting. Your lungs work by vacuum. And so it's like, when you have a glass and you pick it up and the coaster comes up with it. That's how the whole entire respiratory system works, is that you've got a thin layer of liquid around the balloon, which is the lungs. And as you breathe, as your diaphragm pulls it down, and as your ribs expand, you suck air in. And that's entirely because you've got that suction of the lungs. If you poke a little tiny hole in your rib here and you give a little bit of air there, you can have collapse. You'll have collapse of whole sections of the lung. And they'll put a tube back in and it'll be suctioned out, and they'll try to pull it back. It's exquisitely sensitive.
The painful thing
Yes.
you ever
Yes, it's
experienced.
exquisitely sensitive. It's very, very painful.
Oh,
And worst case scenario, they can put chalk in there. They put like doctors, cardiothoracic surgeons, they'll put a little slurry of chalk in there and it'll scar it down if you have a recurrent pneumothorax or hemothorax, which is blood.
hot pads on them.
Yeah, did that work?
They used to take you up too.
For rib fractures.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
well, for pleurisy.
I don't.
I have-
Pleurisy just is bad. If you can avoid it, do. Yes.
Well, it's actually the irritation.
It's the irritation.
Right, and if you're in the field, you won't be getting a chest tube, but you'll put plastic on.
Yeah,
You
you can.
seal the hole,
Yeah,
the outside.
because every breath you take in, you're going to suck more air in there.
Yeah.
So if you can, what your body does with air in a cavity, it sucks the oxygen out over time, because our body uses oxygen. So if you've got a little sack of air anywhere that it's not supposed to be, the oxygen will go out, and then you'll have a negative pressure opening in your body, and fluid will gradually accumulate in there. So that's where you get cysts and things like that. But you would gradually accumulate fluid in there. It would probably heal itself if you didn't keep making it worse. What the worst thing is when you have a flap, a one-way flap, and every breath you take in, this is like combat or motor vehicle accidents or things like that. If you have a one-way valve and every breath you take in, you inhale air, and then when you exhale, it closes it. Every breath in, inhale more air into the wrong place. You can cause it's called a tension pneumothorax, where it's constantly pushing air in, and you can die of that. And that's where in the movies you'll see them poke a hole in the back, and it'll go pshh, and the air comes out because it's under pressure. I have no desire to ever do that. That's what those ER docs do. They love, they live for that. That's not my thing, yeah.
Don't worry. Sticking, Don.
So anyway, we've come along. I mean, we've been here for years and years. I think maybe 30 of you guys are new. I'm maybe 25% new this year. We'll be in a new place next year. Humanity has made massive progress in the last 150 years. I'm very optimistic that we're going to continue to make great progress. We have challenges, antibiotic stewardship, big deal. Immunizations, we're making progress on all those things. And if bird flu comes up, go hang out in northern New Hampshire just for a year or two. Take some groceries and wait for it to pass. It'll pass relatively quickly because everybody who's going to get it's going to get it, and that's that.
Montana here right now.
What?
Montana.
Yeah, just go someplace else or stay in your house. Okay, so that's it, gentlemen. I think the ladies are.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for coming. Thank you.
Right in there.